going to get going here with our last session. I see some of you have found the bar already, which is great. If you haven't, that is open. My name is Gerald Erlob with Network Center. The last 3-4 years, we've been kind of ending Envision with the Leaders in IT panel. It seems to be a nice way to, I guess, casually end the day. Hopefully content throughout the day has been meaningful and worthwhile to you. We certainly want to thank these 4 gentlemen for joining us. I'm going to have them introduce themselves. And the reason for that is just to give us a little more background so you folks understand where they're at, the size of their organization, maybe number of employees. As we go through, we're going to ask some various questions so you have perspective as far as where they're coming from with those answers. So, gentlemen, thank you again for volunteering to be on our panel this year. We do appreciate it. Again, this is meant to be, pretty casual discussion, if you will. So let's get started. Introductions. Joel, you want to lead us off?
Sure. So Joel Nett, I'm the Director of Technology for True North Steel. We are a heavy steel fabricator in Fargo here. We have 11 sites through the upper Midwest and Texas. Total about 750, 800 employees.
Perfect. Ryan?
Ryan Lee, so I'm the Director of IT at Wylie. I think we have just a hair over 1,000 employees, 11 locations. We're up into Canada, down into South Carolina, Tennessee, headquartered in North Dakota, though. So most of our staff exists in the North Dakota region.
Joe?
Hi, Joe Yetto, CEO of Cyberstone. We're an information security consulting firm, headquartered out of Albany, New York. 45 employees, so a smaller company, but all of our employees are working remotely, fully distributed across the country.
Perfect. Eric?
Eric Wagner, Director of Information Technology for American Crystal Sugar, the largest producer of sugar from sugar beets in the country. We have about 1,800 employees full-time, and then we ramp up to well over 2,000 during harvest time. 8 locations, and for my staff, I've got about 27 or 28 employees that manage it all.
Perfect. So as all of you could hear, right, it's pretty diverse as far as where they're coming from, both in the industry, size, number of locations, countries, all of those sorts of things. So hopefully that brings good value and some good answers here. Starting off, first question is going to be for all 4 of you. We're going to go actually in reverse order. Eric, if you can lead us off with this. So it could be said over the last 3 years, IT's probably seen its most challenging times ever with what's been put in front of us, right? With the pandemic, the remote work that had to happen so quickly, the security challenges that came with that are still here. Over that time, tell us how you think your organization handled those 3 years, and then also, is there anything you would have maybe done different?
For handling it, yes, we were challenged like all of you. Quick to get everyone remote, quick to bring everybody back in the office. We only spent about a year fully remote, or just over a year, and then people started coming back to the office. We're now in a hybrid role for some employees. Obviously, our factories couldn't go remote. We need workers there to work. As far as handling that, I'd like to say that the team did an incredible job. Even out in the factories, we had to scramble really quick to make sure we had automated ways of taking everyone's temperatures, putting up safety barriers between all the workstations and so on. So it just wasn't an IT thing. It was a company-wide challenge. Since then, though, Teams, hopefully many of you use it. That is what kind of saved our butts. We had implemented just 6 months before the pandemic hit, so we were already in a very good position. Unfortunately, well, maybe fortunately, at the time we barely used Teams, as many of you might be doing today if you've just implemented it. But the pandemic was able to allow us to leverage it, and it just exploded, and it kept the business running because of Microsoft Teams. As far as something we could have done better, yeah, hindsight's always 20/20. I'd probably lean something towards supply chain. I wish we could have predicted something like that. Once we saw the toilet paper leaving the shelves, who would have thought it would have also taken a very long time just to be able to get a server or a switch or a webcam. I still think we have issues trying to find webcams out there. That's something, in hindsight, I wish we would have known better, but now we do for the next time.
Yeah, the supply chain has been a challenge for everyone, right? I don't think you're you're surprising anyone by that. I'll say the team's implementation 6 months before the pandemic, that's just good planning, so way to go on that one.
Good planning or luck?
Yeah. Joe?
Yeah, sure, Joe. So I think accidental luck for us, we were in a position we were working remotely already for about 3.5 years before the pandemic hit. So, nothing that we did intentionally, can't take credit for, but we didn't have to face some of the common challenges we saw across the industry. I think that the challenge we did come across, though, we're a service company, and so many of our customers across the country were asking us for help, and we had such an influx of demand at that point in time that we really had trouble keeping up with. So for us, it was less about technical challenges, more about staffing and human resources, and how do we find qualified individuals to help clients address some of the needs that Eric was just talking about.
Great, thank you. Ryan, how about on your front?
Yeah, so I'll actually speak to the last company I was at. So I recently just started at Wylie like 2 weeks ago. More of my experience is with my previous company, but one thing I was really impressed with that we had done as an entire organization is, I know most IT people are super quick to come up with a technical solution to a problem, and we took kind of a people-first approach. What we did is we knew that people were going to be moving remote, right? So our technical team was in place to be able to handle that and have the solutions. But how did we deal with the people aspect of that? And that's where we really focused on, which was sending people home, making sure we answered and acknowledged all of their needs. We set up training sessions, multiple online training sessions. We did in-office sessions on how to work from home, how to collaborate more effectively, how to communicate when you no longer can be face-to-face with any of your coworkers that you usually talk to, and then tips and tricks just throughout the entire experience to help keep that functional. And then we strongly encouraged Teams video calls. So if you've ever taken any kind of communication class, a big thing they talk about is, I think the stats I remember seeing was something about 55% of any of your communication comes out of body language, and the next 38% is tone, which leaves only, 12 or, I don't know, percent. Math is not my forte. I'm a zeros and ones kind of guy, but it leaves not a whole lot for the actual words you're using, right? So in my mind, video call is the answer to that if you can't be in person. So making sure that people were successful there, and then we did regular check-ins that was led by both the IT and the HR groups to ensure that everybody had their needs met at all times and that they were getting anything addressed on a very timely manner.
There's lots of challenges for sure, and made us all comfortable with things that we weren't necessarily comfortable with before, like all of the video calls, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Joel, how about you?
So I came to True North in the middle of 21, so kind of at the tail end of the big surge for the pandemic. So speaking to what I know now, kind of how they handle it, I think a lot of the lessons learned was just keeping up to date with the technology that you have in place. There was a lot of scrambling, a lot of aging infrastructure, those sort of things that needed to be replaced out in order to facilitate the remote work that was happening. Just like I'm guessing most people in here, it drove the adoption of cloud-based things, Teams, Microsoft 365, those sort of things. I think probably one miss was the security side of things, trying to keep up. We were too busy throwing technology at the problem and not taking a step back and securing that technology.
Great. Next question. We're going to go to Ryan and Joe with this. Ryan, if you want to start us off. So staffing and employee retention, right? It's at the forefront for many organizations. Some have termed this time that we're going through as the Great Resignation that we're seeing. How is your department or company work to address this?
Yeah, so I guess employee retention really boils down to, there's three main points I guess that I'll cover. So having clearly defined roles and job responsibilities is important for employees to know where they sit, what they should be doing, what they should be focusing on. So what I try to do is I do a yearly evaluation of what my employees are working on and what the responsibilities are. And as new responsibilities get added to them, I add that to their job description. And at that point, that really prompts either a change in title or a salary review also, which makes sure that there's not any frustration there on being inappropriately paid for what the actual responsibilities they're facing is. The next piece is clearly defined goals. So IT folks are notorious for not knowing how they fit into the overall organization and what the business strategy and objectives are and how they can help to drive those. So a lot of what I try to do is make sure that I'm communicating that often with my team so that they know that the work that they're doing is adding value to the company and helping further along those strategic objectives. Then the third piece is going to be employee engagement. So if you don't have engaged employees, you're not going to be getting workloads out of them. You're not going to have them interested. They're going to start to lose relationships with their employee or coworkers. And to build employee engagement, the big thing that I look at is training, right? So if you know that you're growing as an employee and that you can be more effective and that you're furthering along your career, that's where engagement's really going to get driven home, and you're going to continue to flourish. And for me, you're going to add a lot of output that helps the whole team stay successful.
Yeah, a few really good areas to try to battle that employee retention, but it is tough. Not only for I think IT, but just in general, right? There's a lot of competition. There's a lot of movement that's happening. Joe, how about for you and your organization? How are you battling that?
Yeah, a lot of similar ways Ryan already expressed. Important to be incredibly transparent with employees around strategic objectives, career development, compensation and performance reviews. All of those are key milestones. In addition, one of the things we learned from the pandemic is how much flexibility employees crave these days, particularly around work schedule, right? And being able to define that a little bit, whether it's the ability, I mean, we, again, always working from home in my organization, but is it okay to take an hour during the day and go to the doctor's appointment, leave an hour early to catch the Little League game for my son that night or daughter, right? And so we introduced a policy where we call it flexible work schedule. And so they essentially, as long as we get the 40 hours we're looking for, it doesn't really matter when they log in to do their job, right? There's communication with the supervisor, the manager, but we give them that flexibility to the extent that we have some employees that are working 3 days a week, and that's it. They take the rest of the week off, right? So that's been received very well. And on the recruiting front, it gives us a little bit more in terms of our value proposition when we're trying to attract talent as well. So I think in addition to what Ryan said, I would say the flexibility part has been a big thing for us for retention.
Yeah, you brought up an interesting part that I think probably came out of the pandemic for a lot of companies, or they're working towards that, is that flexible work schedule and having that part of your employee offering, right? Especially in the IT world, but I think in other specialties as well. That's a value add for a lot of folks, and that's what they're looking for. And a lot of organizations now are starting to build that into their offering where, hey, you can be out of the office for 2 days a week working remote as long as we know when that is going to occur, right? So we know what those expectations are. Does anyone else have that in your offering for your department?
Yeah, we do. It's not necessarily a written rule, but I had that conversation with the entire staff, and I had, one employee that recently had a baby, and everyone's struggling with finding daycare there. So very flexible there. He worked remote for the majority of that time until that came through. So it's the same as these guys are saying too. It's just setting the expectation, communicating. As long as you're getting your work done and the job's getting done, I don't care where you're doing it from. And just, like I said, having that talk with them and letting them know that.
So in an organization your size, do you think it's getting closer to where it is in the written policy and it needs to be?
Honestly, no.
Okay.
I think we, from a culture perspective, have reverted back a little bit. Certain departments, again, everyone handles it differently, but I think globally they want people in the office for the most part. It's something that I think there are quite a few advocates for, though, so I do foresee it changing in the near future.
Yeah. Eric, flip over to you because your department's a little bit bigger. Any written policy around that, or do you allow remote work for your department?
Currently, we're hybrid where we allow 2 days remote work a week. During the summer, the entire company benefits from flex hours. As long as you put in 40 hours, you're good. So you can work 4 10-hour days and you get Fridays off or Mondays or whatever. They have nice long weekends. I don't know if it will become a policy, this flexibility, only because we also have factories. While the office workers can work remotely, we can be more flexible. Factory shifts are factory shifts. And it's really hard from an executive level to say, well, it's good for you guys, but it's not good for the rest of you. So I don't know if it's ever going to be a written policy.
Sure. Understood.
One thing I'd add to that, as far as the retention piece goes, is so you can have a lot of processes and procedures in place and follow kind of a scientific formula, if you will. But one thing, and anyone that knows me or has ever worked with me knows I like to have fun and I don't like to take myself too seriously, right? So making sure that you know that that's safe for your employees, that they can have fun too, and never accepting bad attitudes on the team. So that's going to poison the entire apple barrel, if you will. So you either coach up or coach out when you run into those things.
Yeah, for sure. So let's talk a little bit on economy. Obviously, national, global economy is struggling for various reasons. We won't bring up those reasons today, even though it's voting day. Luckily here, right, we're sheltered a little bit from that, I guess. But interested to hear, I guess, Eric, if you want to lead this one off, what challenges are you seeing economy-based, right? You're a big organization, high revenue, certainly an interesting model from the grower who you're contracted with all the way up to the factory and then the output of all of that goes all over the world. What are you seeing from those challenges with the economy? And it could be department-wise also, right? Because it does get down to that department level.
Sure. I think department level, we are no different than any of you. Supply chain issues. Prices going up because of supply chain or just because companies can charge it now. Company-wide, though, fuel. We need to ship our sugar. That is a huge cost. Whether or not it's by rail or by truck, freight prices have to go up because of that. And that is definitely impacting and then making us think about things that we do. Supplies out in the factories. You know, I talk about supply chain just for IT, but that goes for the factories too. There's an enormous amount of materials that the factories need in order to run. They're being impacted left and right because of all this as well. And lastly, you had mentioned about our growers. We've got 2,700 growers in our cooperative. On-farm profits are going down too because their costs are rising as well, whether or not it's the fuel for their tractors, the chemicals or the fertilizer, whatever, all their prices are going up. And that indirectly affects the cooperative as well. If they're not doing good, we're not doing good.
Sure. Ryan, how about your perspective on that? Anything economy-based? Obviously, similar challenges, right, from the fuel side, I'm assuming. What do you see there?
Yeah, definitely. So at the last organization I was in, we did a lot with oil and gas markets, and we did a lot with aviation. If any of you were flying over the last 2 years, it was pretty rare, right? So, or driving or going anywhere at all. So yeah, that definitely had a huge impact. But past that point, even more of a more granular level was definitely the supply chain piece. So I remember having my infrastructure team quote out a server just for a little one-off scenario. We had $8,000, right, somewhere in that range. We tried to do it at the tail end of the pandemic when it was hard to get supplies, and that was up to $18,000. So more than doubled some of the similar size specs that we were looking for. So that definitely changed how I planned for budgets. That put on hold projects that we wanted to do. The little back burner items were back burnered a lot further, if you will. And then we also needed to start purchasing equipment way further in advance than we ever did before. So instead of getting 5-10 workstations at a time as a new group was hired, we were trying to purchase 3 or 4 every single week just to get them on the shelf so that when we had an influx of new hires that we could actually deal with the problem.
Yeah, interesting take on that, right? As far as planning and projecting those projects go, whereas maybe pre-pandemic we could do, okay, if I approve this 2 or 3 months in advance, that probably gives me lots of time. Whereas now we probably need to be looking at that 6, 9, even 12 months ahead to make sure that we have the product that we need to be able to pull some of these off, and we see those similar challenges. So, jump into the security side quick. Joel, if you want to start us off with this one. So obviously security continues to be at the top of the list for most organizations, most IT folks. Kind of pointed question here. Do you think you're winning the security battle?
No. I don't think we're winning. I think we're maintaining. just trying to keep our head above water. I mean, we've talked to a couple of vendors in here even today. We can't keep ahead of the bad guys. It doesn't seem like no matter what we do, and it's the same. It's not just us. It's everybody's having the same. They find a hole, we fix it. They were already on to the next one. I'd say we've come light years in the last couple years at improving our security stance, and that's been through a combination of training our in-house staff, working with trusted vendors, and just getting the right products and support in place.
Ryan, how about for you guys?
Yeah, no, I totally agree. It's not even close. So the analogy I always use is you have to win this battle hundreds of times a day. Like that's how many times we're getting little drive-by alerts on our firewalls. That's how many times users are getting phishing emails, things like that. So we got to win hundreds of times a day. They need to win once. So no, we're definitely not winning. The biggest thing that we're doing is we're trying to stay as secure as we can. We're trying to work within the budgets that are allocated to us. And I also think of sometimes the running from the bear approach. So you don't have to be faster than the bear. You just got to be faster than Gerald over here.
All right, I understand. Kick me in the knee. Eric?
We've changed our approach starting this last year, and that is, we've spent our money on technology, we've spent our money on intrusion detection, on monitoring, on all the services that the vendors here are selling to you, and a lot of you have probably bought already. But to the point, we're never going to win that battle. They've got more money, they've got more expertise, they can buy the ransomware now as a service. They're always going to be ahead of us. We've shifted our focus from trying to protect ourselves to it's going to happen anyway, so let's focus on a response. What are we going to do when it happens? Whether or not it's continual tabletop exercises, playbooks, or so on, that is our focus now. Because we know what's going to happen sooner or later. Somehow it's going to get through all the technology and processes we put in place, so let's focus on that now.
So not the approach of not if, but when, yes. Right? And being ready for that.
Exactly.
Sure. Joe, purposely let you go last on this because it's a little different perspective with where you're coming from, right? In your organization, you're having those conversations a lot of times. What do you make of those answers, and what do you hear from your clients?
Yeah, sure. I think the word choice is interesting when you say winning. That would indicate that there's a scoreboard, right? Or that there's some way to keep score. And I think that's the interesting conversation that we have with clients many times is we're trying to get them to redefine how they look at the desired outcome. When they're building an information security program, it's really not to be 100% secure. It's not, the outcome cannot be to never have an incident or to never have some kind of disruptive event. Really, you have to redefine what is the outcome, what is the goal, and for most, if you can wrap your head around, hey, my goal is to get the greatest amount of risk reduction given the resources I have, then I'm winning, and that's how you define it. Otherwise, you're showing up to a baseball game, the visiting team has a 6-0 lead, and there's only a half inning to play, and you're just, it's discouraging. You're always going to lose to the credit, right? So we're trying to get people to think a little bit differently about the desired outcome, and then hopefully it becomes a little more exciting to work on.
Yeah, good answers all around. Thank you for that. So a little bit back to the employee side, right? In IT, I think we continue to see this siloing effect of IT resources, where they're becoming very specialized, not only in what they can do, but what they want to do, which both of those are challenges for leaders in IT, right? Because you have to navigate through that. Talk to us a little bit about your experience with that, but then also how important is it to have that resource on your department that is that, as Todd with our organization defines it, that IT generalist, right? That knows a lot about everything because of that experience. So how are you navigating through that siloing effect with your department? And then also, how important is that resource in your department who knows a lot about everything, is that generalist? Joel?
So we're a smaller company, 7 people on the IT team, so I have 7 people on my team. We don't have the room for the siloing, I guess. There's a little bit, I mean, we have our definitions, our defined roles, engineering, application, help desk, that sort of thing. But it's kind of that jack of all trades. I shouldn't say master of none because one of my employees is in here. But excuse me. We have to cross train for bench depth. And to some degree, when you get to some of the very specialized, the high-end stuff, the engineering things, we rely on vendors to help us with that bench depth as well. But we have to avoid that siloing as much as possible and have those frank conversations because, yes, there is going to be certain career paths that those individuals want to take that may not be the benefit to the company or this position that we need.
Sure. Interesting take, right? When it is a smaller department, if you will, but knowing where those strengths lie and where you might need help with certain projects or certain job functions or IT functions, right? With that outsourcing. Ryan, how about for you guys?
Yeah, so, and I've ran into this both working in the public space and in the private space, and a lot of people are used to getting, they're the most knowledgeable or they're the one willing to take on a new project, so you become the owner, and you never get to give that up. You own it forever, and no one else wants to learn it. So sometimes it just happens, right? And when you discover that, that's when you, sometimes you just have to tell your team, you're going to learn this. And I always look for 3 options, right? So I usually have a primary on any application, system, or process, and then a secondary that should know it just as well as the primary does, but does it just a little bit less frequently. And then there's a tertiary who could figure it out if they had to in the hit by a bus scenario. The thing that I've also ran into quite often, though, is the times where you become a silo through your own design because it's job security or you like to know the most about it and be needed. When you run into those things, you make it very clear with your staff that if you're a silo because of that, you're not valuable on my team anymore. You're not needed if you're the single point of failure because you design all of your IT systems with backups and redundancy in mind. Why aren't you doing the same thing with your personnel? So making sure that they know that kind of behavior, thought process is just unacceptable.
Yeah, for sure. Interesting challenges there. Joe, I'm going to come back to you last. Eric, how about for you folks? Bigger department. I'll make the assumption that maybe a few folks are more specialized in what they are doing. Is that a challenge for you?
Most definitely. Well, I said before, I think 28, 29 people, that is still relatively small to some of the larger companies in the area, whether or not it's Doosan or some of the financial institutions, which are much larger than us. When I started 6 years ago, we were definitely siloed, the IT team. Long-term applications breeds that because one person has maintained this for X number of years and they've turned themselves into their own silo. We've fought hard against that. Jack of all trades are very important today. Technology is continually changing. The legacy technology you have, in the next few years, you're going to be changing it out. So to be agile and adaptive to these newer technologies is critical. To your point, some things do need to be siloed. SAP, that is our ERP system.
Sure.
There aren't many companies in the Fargo-Moorhead area that are running SAP. The people that run that are very specialized, which kills us because whether or not they retire or turnover or whatever, we just can't find those resources here. So believe me, we struggle with how can we make that not that silo anymore, and I haven't solved that yet. But for most other positions, we work very hard at it, and it would be important for all of you too, whether or not you're on the application development side or the infrastructure side. Don't get siloed into just Windows or just .NET. Broaden yourselves because you're going to be more valuable to employers in the future.
Great, thank you. Joe, finish us up on that because you get to see the other side of it sometimes, right? A smaller organization yourself, but you get to look into a lot of different organizations, big, small. How are you seeing that siloing be a challenge for them?
Yeah, I think the concept of a generalist, specifically in information technology, is attractive because we're just scratching for human capital in the first place, right? That resource isn't available, and so It's attractive in our organization, though. We're the vendor, we're the specialist that these gentlemen would call, and so we rage against that concept internally, and we actually have radical silos, and everyone stays in their lane because mastery orientation is so important. We need to be the best in the world at what we do. So many of our team, they're not the general physician, they're the heart surgeon, right? They're the cancer specialist, and so for us, it's important to do that, but working with other clients, it's very common to see generalists and see the role that they play. And I don't think it's good or bad. I just think it brings pros and cons. From an information security standpoint, I'll say that some of the deficiencies we see, some of the mistakes that are made, tend to be made by the generalists, and it's not malicious, it's not intentional, it's just they don't know any better, right? So I think if you have that generalist resource on your team, you just got to be careful about what you ask them to do and try not to put them in a position to fail.
Right. Very good. With that, we're going to wrap this up because these guys want to get to the bar too. Thank you guys very much for all of the information that you shared, your perspective on these. For all of you, hope that that was worth it to you to hear from some of your peers as they go through probably some of the same challenges or face the same battles that you face every single day. So gentlemen, again, thank you very much. I think I am going to, go ahead, Joe.
Thank you.
Oh yeah, I'm going to turn this over to Andrew to wrap us up right away. Is that right? Yep. All right, perfect. Thank you guys.